In the reading, we observe that Jesus was arrested by the soldiers, who would have been Roman, and the Jewish police. Now that is a very strange alliance, since these two groups would normally have been enemies. However, they come together to make this arrest and to bring Jesus to be tried at the bar of religion. The Sanhedrin and the high priestly family were collaborators. They were the people who tried to work with the Roman occupiers and exercise power on their behalf. More conservative Jews would have seen them as collaborators. They agreed with the Romans that religion should be used to keep law and order, or as a modern sociologist would say, religion is the glue of society. They believed the Sanhedrin and the high priestly family should work with the Romans so that religion had a role to keep law and order in a very divided and volatile world. Many of us might agree that that is what religion is for, to keep law and order, to maintain moral standards and acceptable behaviour. Caiaphas the high priest was the one who advised the Jews that it was advantageous for one person to die than the whole people perish. So religion has to be practical, sensible. He was not to know the irony of John's statement that actually because one person dies, no one would perish. He said that it was better for religion to preserve life and be sensible and useful. Fanatical groups and their leaders should be contained. Religion was important for stability and security. It should never become a movement for wild hopes and unrealistic dreams. Annas, who was the father-in-law of the high priest, had been high priest himself, and 4 of the sons of Annas had been high priests. Here we have an example of a family of sons and sons-in-laws who had established a monopoly on this job. Some of us might recognise that one of the temptations of religion is that often it tends to become controlled by small groups. Sometimes we see this in parishes, especially in villages. Similarly, in larger churches, it is often a small group who labour mightily and do wonderful things, but become a closed circle who control what is considered to be normal and proper religious practices and beliefs. This monopoly of control develops from the best of motives, but the result can be dangerous. Jesus did call small groups, but to be leaven, servants, sacrificing themselves for others. In the case of this incident in John's Gospel, this small group did not just control the religion that collaborated with the Romans to keep order. The group also oversaw the traders in the temple. We can recall that Jesus went and knocked over the tables of the traders in the temple. Those businesses were owned and controlled by the high priestly family. Thus Jesus had already upset them by the disturbance he caused in the temple in challenging the way they were using this holy space. This is the setting. The high priestly family, a small group controlling religion, working with the authorities. Everybody has got to be in their place. And Jesus has disrupted this tightly organised system by the challenge in the temple. For this reason he is on trial before the court of established religion. Next we have Peter, who is a disciple of Jesus. He is not known in these circles of religious leaders. Another disciple who is known by Annas brings him into the courtyard to witness this trial. Peter enters our text by a gate. This gate would probably have been the entrance to the part of the temple that only Jewish males could enter, the part that was governed by the strictest rules. Here we see that Peter is moving away from Jesus and entering by the gate of religion, the gate into the system that is controlling the people. He moves from being a follower of Jesus in that band of disciples who we excluded from this traditional approach to religion, to joining that very group, those who deny Jesus as the Messiah. Thus, most dramatically, when some of the officers of this official religion say, "Do you know this person?" Peter replies, "No." You may recall another part of John's Gospel where Jesus says you must enter by the gate, but the gate you must enter by is Jesus himself. There is always a choice between getting a sense of personal identity from religious practices and groups and following Christ, who offers the constant growth and development of our identity. Religion is on trial when we have to make this choice as disciples. Here we confront one of the great temptations and trials of religion, the choice to seek to affirm the safe values of being respectable and controlling human passions in order to keep law and order. This kind of religion depends upon conformity to established patterns and views. Peter has entered a public world where everybody seems to be saying, this person cannot be the Messiah. In this time of trial by public values and opinions, Peter, having been this faithful person who would die with Jesus, finds himself saying, I don't know this man, he has nothing to do with me. In a world where religion is allowed only the narrow role of encouraging people to conform to law and order, and any other role is seen to be a bit risky, it is very tempting for the established culture to absorb everybody who wants to be religious, just as we see Peter being converted to such conformity when the differences between the two approaches have to be confronted. We live in a culture where there is a strong desire for law and order, and religion becomes a force for the kind of peace and justice that does not disturb anything or cause any problems. This inclines us to empathise with Peter as he goes and warms himself with those others who are putting Jesus on trial. A contemporary philosopher, Richard Sennett, has written about the warmth of intimacy. He argues that in the modern world, because of the weakness of religion, what people in the West really believe in, and what really sustains us in trying to survive in a cold, dark context like that courtyard Peter had entered, is the instinct to huddle together for intimacy. Because we have disengaged from public rituals and doctrines, all we have got is the relationships we can make and build around us to keep us warm. On their own, these relationships are fragile, and they are often the source of evil and bitching. Paradoxically, the only way to keep relationships warm and working is to find ways of enabling forgiveness, new life and proper growth. Otherwise, the huddles for the warmth of intimacy prove to be shifting, short-lived, and leave us too often exposed in the cold courtyard where all religion and personal values are put on trial. In our text we have a picture of Peter joining the warming comfort and intimacy of the established approach to religion. At this moment of trial he finds himself denying Jesus and the alternative approach that he has tried to offer. Jesus is brought to trial at the Sanhedrin. This was a court that had to have at least 23 judges. They sat in a semicircle and there were 2 clerks, one to record an acquittal and one to record a judgment of guilty and condemnation. If the judgment was acquittal, it was recorded immediately and the person was free. If the judgment was condemnation, it was not recorded for 24 hours to give people time to consider the verdict and thus to make sure that they really wanted to record a judgment of guilty. The evidence of our text shows that this trial was corrupt, since the court decided that they wanted to condemn Jesus immediately. If he was condemned, they should have gone away and come back in 24 hours, having thought and prayed about the verdict, as good religious people should, so as to be sure that they knew what they were doing. This trial is also corrupt according to the account in John, because the high priest says to Jesus, "What have you and your disciples been doing? What have you been preaching?" In the procedure of the Sanhedrin, it was not permitted to ask the accused to condemn themselves, and that is why Jesus replies, Why are you asking me? You are not supposed to be asking me. I am not supposed to condemn myself. Here we can see a form of religion that is so keen to maintain law and order that it in fact breaks its own rules. It does not wait 24 hours for a considered verdict of guilty and condemnation, and it does not observe the right of the defendant not to incriminate themselves so that the case has to be made by asking other witnesses. This is why Jesus says quite openly, not in closed religious circles like that of the group putting him on trial, I have spoken to everybody and anybody. I have been to the temple and to the synagogue. I have spoken in the streets, in cities and villages. Ask those who have heard me. Jesus reminds his judges that they should seek evidence, not just in their own little group, but in the wider world where his word and his love have been offered. Here is an important paradox. The religion that claims to offer control and security for everyone, in fact operates in closed, exclusive circles, whereas the religion that is accused of being a small seditious sect operates openly, with maximum accountability and transparency. There may be a strong challenge in this particular trial for us to recognise that religious people need to be in dialogue with the rest of God's children, because what we are given is for them as well as for us. Too often we can become like this group around Caiaphas and Annas, who Peter has joined. We are so locked into our own little world and how we control it. We are so nervous of anybody disturbing it that we end up employing our own systems and processes to get what we want and doing it corruptly, if need be, rather than using them to maintain our respect and care for people. Furthermore, we end up denying the Messiah. We deny having anything to share with God's children in an open, transparent way, being in dialogue and listening, practicing all the things Jesus did so radically.